थोड़ा सा छोटा है ज्यादा। चलो ट्राई करता हूँ, पर ये नहीं देख रही ना, बिल्कुल
स्टार्ट हो गया। स्टार्ट हो गया।
Good evening and welcome to this month's edition of the MindSmith live stream. And this month's topic, as you might be already aware, is self harm. Now, what is it that makes some people cut, scratch, carve out, burn their skin, or sometimes hit or punch themselves, or even bang their heads against a wall? For several years, psychologists have theorized that such self harming behavior helps to regulate these people who are suffering from certain negative emotions. If a person is feeling angry, very upset, very anxious, or probably very depressed, and lacks a better way of expressing it, self injury may fill that particular role. Now, self harm involves a person damaging their body by cutting, burning, scratching, or practicing any other behavior that results in pain or in injury. There are different motivations which can encourage people towards self harm. One may feel very overwhelmed with emotion, or one on the exact flip side may be feeling completely numb emotionally. And self harm may seem like the only viable way of expressing that emotion. Now, it is thought of as a mental health issue, and it's a common symptom in several psychological conditions of a more severe variety. Even though self harm has been studied extensively over decades, the findings are never very entirely accurate, because the stigma and the shame that still surrounds self injury, it prevents people from actually truthfully reporting self harm. The actual rates are definitely very much higher than whatever is currently reported and estimated. In one analysis of self injury across around 40 countries, it was found that almost 17% of people at some point in their life will, you know, indulge in self harm behavior. The average age of the first incident is about 13 years of age, and about 45% of people use cutting as a method of self injury. Half of these people will seek help for their self harm, but probably only from friends or relatives, and very rarely from professionals. Now, not only is self harm completely preventable, but its rates can be brought down. In the last few years, we have seen, according to emergency room trends, that there's been almost a 50% increase in reporting of self injury amongst young women since about 2009. The DSM-5 classifies this as a new disorder under need of further study, as well as a symptom of a borderline personality disorder, which can be marked by such tendencies as emotional instability, um, chaotic relationships, and a chronic feeling of emptiness. Why would people report feeling better after hurting themselves? This is a very interesting phenomenon that it is reported widely that there is a certain relief, a pain offset which happens after this kind of a behavior. According to this concept, virtually everyone experiences an unpleasant physical reaction to a painful stimulus, but removing the stimulus does not return the individual to the pre stimulus state. And it leads them into a short but intense level of happiness, probably an escape from the original uh, unmanageable emotional state they were trying to escape. Using you know this technique of pain offset relief conditioning, researchers also found that if you paired the pain with a stimulus, over time people would react more favorably to the pain, because they have learned to associate it with a certain pain relief. When rats were shocked and then presented with a pleasant odor, many a times the rats would start seeking out that smell actively. Research also demonstrates that the most common motivator for self harm was to manage emotions, to feel in control. It was also followed approximately in 25% of cases by a feeling of self punishment, a feeling of guilt, a feeling of I deserve the pain, I deserve the punishment. Over half of patients also report that the motivation for self harm includes habit or a compulsion or a distraction, and even sometimes as a curiosity. Now, self harm is not always easy to detect, as I have already explained, that it's something which is still seen with a certain amount of shame and stigma, and people would often try to hide it. But there are some soft signs which can tell the more observant person that another person might be indulging in some kind of self-injurious behavior. And this would include certain scars that occur in patterns, and sometimes restricted to a particular area of the body. The inner thigh is many a times associated with repeated cutting behavior, and of course the region is chosen which is not usually visible, and is usually covered by normal everyday clothing. So keeping sharp objects, like knives and needles and razor blades, accessible on hand when a person does not have any clear regular usage for them. Fresh scars, scratches, even bite marks or bruises in certain cases. One would also observe a pattern of repeatedly rubbing over one particular area of the body which has been harmed repeatedly. Wearing long sleeves and pants even in very hot weather, you know general display of low self-esteem, right? Certain amount of negative self-talk, including this very common theme of hopelessness. Also, such patients may display feelings of worthlessness. Their behavior may at times be seen as unpredictable and may be labeled as impulsive. They may, of course, be making some excuses to explain away these very visible injuries if they are questioned. More often, self harm might, as already stated, be a mechanism for coping with emotional distress. So, people who select this emotional outlet, they may be using it to express a certain feeling for which they are not able to find the correct vocabulary, or they may not be able to deal with this feeling of unreality or numbness. It may be there to stop flashbacks of a painful episode. And as we already discussed, it might be a self punishment inflicted upon some for some imagined or real wrong or guilt a person is dealing with, and it may relieve tension sometimes in the short term. Now, self injury can be considered to be associated with certain conditions, and one should definitely look out for and probably dig in deeper to rule out issues of clinical depression, any other mood disorder like a bipolar disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, borderline personality disorder, other anxiety disorders like PTSD. Definitely, one should also rule out eating disorders. Alcohol and substance use can also contribute to some certain types of self injurious behaviors, right? The next research question may seem very obvious, that if anybody can experience pain relief by inflicting pain on themselves, why don't more of us do it, right? I mean, if there is some amount of relief with this pain, then why doesn't one see it happening more often? And to ask the question in a different way, why do self injurious people harm themselves instead of opting for healthier or more pleasant ways of relieving emotional pain, such as, say, watching a movie, meeting a friend, going for a physical exercise class, yoga? But the thing is that the more vulnerable people feel, the less willing they are to endure a bad situation, right? The worse people feel about themselves, the more inclined they are to try to use such painful methods of mood regulation. It is definitely not desirable and a maladaptive method of dealing with a mood disorder, but it is seen, and it is to be seen as a symptom of something deeper. The list of various psychiatric disorders which I just mentioned, right? And one thing which I am very wary of, and I keep hearing from a lot of non psychiatric colleagues, is that self harm is about attention seeking. Well, I definitely assure you it's not. It's, as I've already stated repeatedly, it's a way of managing an unmanageable situation. Most young people who self harm will go to great lengths to draw as little attention to themselves and to this behavior by self harming in a private part, or by harming parts of the body which are not easily visible, right? So it's definitely not about attention seeking, and it would be a great disservice if we were to label self harming behavior as attention seeking. No. It's not a way of manipulation. It's not a way of seeking some attention and some gains associated with attention. It is a cry for help. It is most definitely an emotional dysregulation. Now, it's estimated that around a third to a half of the young people who self harm, they do not seek support for this behavior, and there are several barriers which I would like to discuss in a little detail right now. Uh, the first belief is that since I cannot understand my own emotion and manage it, it's very difficult for them to imagine that others would understand their self-harming behavior. The issue is that I will not be understood. That's the first biggest barrier against self-harm. The fear of confidentiality being breached, that it may, if I share it with someone, I'm not sure how good they are at keeping this news to themselves, and I do not become a laughing stock of other people if such a detail of my behavior is leaked. The fear of being seen as attention seeking, this is one label which people don't want if they are indulging in this kind of a behavior, or if they are forced to cut themselves or harm themselves. They have the fear of being stigmatized, the fear of being reacted to in a very negative manner if self harm is disclosed, and also asking themselves this question, that If I do share this very intimate detail with somebody, could the other person actually do anything to help? That is a very real and valid reason of not sharing it. They don't believe that anybody can help them out of this situation, right? And if this particular situation is happening because of an underlying disorder like depression, anxiety, or even suicidal ideation, the chances of it being shared openly are further minimized because of the nature of the beast, because of the nature of these diseases, which anyway force a person to cut off social contact, to minimize contact with people in terms of telling about self and being vulnerable. uh, I think it becomes a challenge. The belief that one should be able to cope with one's challenges on one's own. Another self defeating belief, but very prevalent, very common, which people do exhibit. That this is my problem and I should be. Man enough or an adult to enough to deal with it, and that fear, that particular mindset does keep people from sharing their self-harm behavior with anybody, even friends or family. uh, Mehanga Singh has typed in a question, and I would say yes, please, please ask me a question if you want. And I'm sorry, I used the name the first time around. I will not be using the name of the person who wants to ask a question. Please do type in your question. I'll try to answer it here. Now, young people may also be prevented from seeking help because they simply don't know where or who to turn for support, right? And young people are very likely to turn towards friends, or close family, and unfortunately many a times friends and family may not be equipped to handle this kind of a disclosure, this kind of a situation. And that, I think, is where, if you are in contact with such a person who has exhibited any kind of self-harm behavior, I think if it is being disclosed, the first and best thing you can do is take your friend to a specialist, take your friend to an expert, a psychiatrist, a good psychologist, and disclose the behavior so that something can be done. Psychiatrists and psychologists are experts in behavior, right? And behavior is what is causing issues for that person. And my one suggestion would be, as a well wisher, take your friend to the nearest expert or the best expert you can find. Now, the internet, of course, is a resource for information and communications on self harm, and a certain amount of research, it does suggest that the commonly used tool for self disclosures can be used rather than directly asking for help. But young people may prefer to discuss their self harm on the internet, because it does provide you a certain anonymity, a certain validation maybe sometimes, and there might be certain groups which could be dedicated to people finding solutions for common problems. And uh, one of the hashtags related to self cutting had more than 56 million search results. So one can safely ascertain from this one fact that yes, this problem does have a massive footprint, but is not talked about as often as it should be. As incidents of self harm aren't that unusual, right? One may find oneself in a position of recognizing and providing support to the mostly young people who are self harming, right? It is important to reach out and try not to be judgmental. That's their number one fear, that people will judge them. So the first thing is to be supportive and non-judgmental. Okay, it's a fact. Yes, people do it. I have heard about it, that people do it, and they do it because there is emotional distress. So I'm here. Let's talk about it. What exactly it is, and then the next dealing with self harm can be challenging, definitely, and one and confronting it, for caregivers can be a very daunting task, and at times caregivers, friends, loved ones may find them at a loss of options. What do I tell the person? How do I support him? So number one, be non-judgmental, hear things out. Whatever is being said, accept it on face value. Do not rush to, oh, but you could have done that, oh, but you could have. No, do not throw any suggestions. The person, I believe, has already tried all those particular options in their mind and somehow decided that those options don't work for him. So throwing those options again may be counterproductive, and it may sound very judgmental. What best we can do and the most useful would be to seek support from a healthcare professional. Again, a psychiatrist, a good psychotherapist, psychologist, they will know what to talk, what are the right things to say, and how to actually help a person out of this kind of a behavior. If somebody and are very and have found out that the person is cutting themselves or is engaging in some form of self injury, the first thing, offer non judgmental support. People who are engaged in self harm, they tend to be self critical already. They are already struggling with certain feelings of hopelessness and helplessness, and it is a judgment by somebody with whom this has been shared, definitely will put them back into their shell, and that is not what we want. Right, so that you care, that you are concerned, encourage the individual to reach out to a parent, maybe a counselor, a psychiatrist. You may not understand the behavior, but it's important not to dismiss their emotion. Right, dismissing the emotion means that, why would you do that? You don't need to do that. You have everything else. Look at the bright side. No, that is dismissive of an emotion. Whatever emotion the person is feeling at that point in time is valid. Right, yes, they may not have the maturity or the tools to deal with that particular emotion, but the emotion per se is not invalid. For that person, within that reality in which that he or she is living, that emotion is very valid. So give credence to that emotion, that okay, I can understand that you might feel this way. I can appreciate it. Okay. I may not have felt the same, but I can understand that you might be feeling something which is very distressing for you and for which you are not able to find relief. And let me help you find relief. One thing absolutely not to be done is to threaten the person. We have to understand that self harm behavior happens because of an emotional turmoil, and a threat on top of that is not going to reduce the stress. It might just increase the stress, and the only outcome of a threat would be that you would not come to know of it the next time the person self harms. The self harming behavior may not stop. So if a child or a teenager or a young adult is engaging in self harm and has shared it with you, or you have found out without voluntary sharing also, please do not do not be accusatory. Right, do not threaten. Talk to a specialist, talk to a doctor. It's a medical issue, it's not a moral issue. Right, encourage the person to seek the right kind of help. That's the best thing you can do. you know Offer to go with the person to a mental health professional. Let's talk about it. It's not a big deal. It's something which is causing dysfunction in behavior, and it is something which can be helped. Right, I have a question here which talks about how I saw a majority of students who um, try to die by suicide if they get low marks in their exams instead of sharing their problems with their family members as well as teachers. Well, yes, this is unfortunately a reality, right? That academic pressures do drive our youth towards taking extreme measures because the failure of one exam is seen as a failure of a person. And the world is full of people who have done very poorly academically, but who have done very well in life. Academics are not the entire story ever. Although in India, I do understand that academics are given a much higher, you know, a much higher valuation by parents and well concerned members of the society, right? So I think it's a very cultural thing why a lot of students feel that they will not be understood if they share that, that academics is not one area of life in which they are excelling, or they may in fact have failed an exam, right? But this fear of failure which our society carries within itself, as a very core belief that failure is the end of life, whereas in reality, if you see any successful human being, their life is usually a series of failures. And a series of failures means that the failure is not an opposite of success. The failure is the process to success. However, I do see in Indian families where children are scared of failure, of academic, being unsuccessful academically. And it has been driven so deep into them that one single instance of low marks and or having failed an exam, they feel that they cannot face up to their parents or their teachers or society in general, and the sense of shame and the sense of poor self-esteem is so extreme that the person actually thinks that in the given situation probably death is an easier escape than facing society. But I assure you, this I think is contingent on the larger society, on all of us, to not make academic success everything in life. We are already coming into a situation in this 21st century where degrees and your academic sheet hardly makes much of a difference in the real market out there, in the jobs market, where people are more concerned about hands-on skills, about what problem you can solve as an individual rather than what your mark sheet says, right? So mark sheets become irrelevant after a certain point in time. And it's a very valid point which has been brought up by my young friend here. And I would think that yes, I think studies and academic pressures need to be decreased. We need to understand that life is a much bigger game than simply uh, remembering things and reproducing them on a piece of paper, right? And I have seen both sides of this in my years of life, where people I have seen doing exceptionally well academically, not doing very well at life sometimes, and people not doing very well academically, actually doing exceptionally well at reality of life. So I think that's what we as a society need to address. Number one, we need to normalize the talk about failure. We need to normalize the talk about today's topic of self harm. Such thoughts do come, such actions do happen, and it simply means that there is a dysregulation of emotional content, and you probably need an expert with whom you can share what you are feeling and who can help you find a way out of this without damaging yourself, without harming yourself. Even if you do this kind of a behavior, it's okay. It's not something which is unknown, and you are not alone. There are other people who have done this. There are other people who are going through this, and it actually means that these people need some help in the short term, and it is something which can be controlled, which can be managed, and which we as a society should normalize the talk around. It's not something which needs to be hidden, or something which needs to be judged, or something which needs to be uh, talked about in a derogatory manner. It is not it's not a moral judgment. It does not mean that you are a lesser human being. It simply means that you need help in the short term from an expert. Take that help, learn how to manage it, and go on and do good things in your life. On that positive note, this is me, Dr. Satyen Sharma, on the MindSmith Live on the first Thursday of March. We'll see you on the first Thursday of April. Signing off. Bye bye.